call the Sunnyvale 4B Economic Development Board meeting to order for Tuesday, August 9th at 5:35 p.m. All members present except members Cash, Nair, and Hussein. Open with introduction.
President Weiss and 4B board members, we'd like to introduce y'all to Lexi Kidder. Lexi is going to be serving as our support for finance and economic development for both departments. Lexi graduated summa cum laude this past December and holds both a Bachelor of Science in Forensic Accounting and an Associate's of Applied Science in Accounting. Additionally, Lexi honorably served as an airman first class in the U.S. Air Force. So, as you all remember, this was originally it was a part-time position. We had a lot of, we didn't get a lot of interest, and so finance had a need as well for some additional support. So we were able to put these two sources of funding to get a full-time person. I think it's going to be real good. So, and we're glad to have her. So,
Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks for your service as well. So, and where did you go to school? New England College. Cool. And then the Air Force, where all were you? Okay. We're glad to have you. Great. Next is open for public comment. So the 4B Board of Directors invites citizens to address the board on any matter except items on the agenda. Comments related to the items on the agenda in public hearings will be heard when the specific item/hearing starts. Citizen comments are limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise required by law. Doesn't appear that anybody's present. Anybody online?
No, sir.
So no one's present for public comment. Move on to next. Discuss, consider, and act upon the minutes from June 14, 2022. Everybody had an opportunity to scan them. We had some lengthy conversation at the end of the meeting. I was reading the minutes.
I can do the platform.
Yeah. The only thing I know we mentioned at the end when we were talking about the council's website, I shouldn't say the council, the town's website separate from 4B's website, was that if the town was wanting to update theirs, maybe we could work together on doing the both at the same time, so they're shared cost. And
I know the town has been working on their website. It's a different vendor, and I know it was August 1st, I think. Each department had to have all of their updates to Erica, and she's been going through and making sure there's no broken links and things like that. As far as the layout, I'm not sure if they're looking at changing that, but it is two different vendors. So
okay. I know they serve two totally different purposes, but
right.
It'd be nice if appearance-wise and everything they were cohesive. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve? Motion made by member Padmanabhan,
I second.
seconded by member Anthony. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Next, discuss, consider, and act upon the June 2022 and then the July 2022 financial reporting and related items.
Good evening. We will start with our numbers as of June the 30th of 2022. You have year-to-date revenues of $966,873 and year-to-date expenses $528,760. Sales tax recorded year to date is $959,548. That is a total of 9 months, 7 months accrual, 7 months actual, 2 months accrual. Year-to-date interest earned is $7,325. Your year-to-date expenses total $528,760, and your month-to-date expenses included your routine payroll and landscape maintenance at the Four Corners. We had some turf grass treatment at the parks. We paid the initial payment for updated maps. We paid for the title sponsorship for the Sunnyvale Business Expo, some park benches, grill replacements, and also for tree clearing services on the Rails to Trails property. So as of June the 30th of 2022, you had total revenues $966,874 and total expenditures of $528,761. That's bringing your total fund balance as of 6/30 to $3,457,573. Anybody has any questions on that, on the month of June, be happy to answer them. If not, we can go into July. Okay, for the month of July, we had year-to-date revenues of $1,089,256. Year-to-date expenses of $571,492. Your sales tax recorded year-to-date is $1,080,891. That is 2 months accrual, 8 months actual, so it reflects 10 months of the year. Year-to-date interest earned is $8,365. Your year-to-date expenses total $571,492. Month-to-date expenses include your routine payroll and monthly landscape maintenance. Had fire ant control at the parks. We paid our annual subscription renewal for economic impact software. We paid the final billing on the park's concept planning, and we were Rydell Plumbing for a drinking fountain at Samuel Farm North. So as of July the 31st, 2022, you had total revenues of $1,089,257 and total expenditures of $571,492, bringing your total fund balance to $3,537,224. And currently, as of July the 31st, your revenue for sales tax receipts is trending at about 27% over your budget.
Yeah, it looks like the lowest has been roughly 20,000 over the last, several months. So it's nice that the revenue is exceeding expenses. Looking at on page 27, the grants, or not, the incentives. I was just curious when some of them are going to be paid. So it looked, the ones at the top are obvious, but then coming down, it looks like Baker's Ribs will get one next month.
Yeah.
It's annual in September.
Normally, we see them start to submit those to us sometime in late September, maybe even the first part of October, but we can post it to the prior year when we make that payment.
Okay.
And we should have one from Baker's Ribs and the Settlers Table next door. That's the GNS Foods, and should definitely get one from Chick-fil-A. I'm not aware of anything that we would get sales tax reimbursement for this fiscal year on the athletic club.
Right. I was just curious. I didn't know if it had to be a full year and then where we stood on those two, but it sounds like it'll just be next couple of months. We'll see those.
Yes, we should see something on the next couple of months for the top three.
Right.
Yes.
And then coming down to the bottom, I guess we'll talk about this on Rails to Trails because most of the grant applications we submitted, other than the one for the local parks, all rails to trails. Any other questions on finance?
I do have one quick update I wanted to share with y'all. Because of the timing difference between when 4B has to approve their budget and when the town actually adopts their budget, 4B has to approve theirs 60 days prior to the end of the fiscal year. So as a board, 4B approved it in the month of June because we did not have a July meeting. Well, while the numbers that you approved are still good numbers, we have had some more months to collect data to make some recommendations for next year's budget in relation to sales tax. As you're seeing, it's trending, over the budget. So there, in all likelihood, there will be an amendment to the 4B budget that will take place after the fiscal year turns. So once we get into next fiscal year, we will come back and look at what we budgeted in sales tax receipts for 4B, and there might be one or two minor adjustments to expenses. So for sales tax receipts, currently we budgeted for next year 1.183 million, and right now, based on the trends that we're seeing, we're going to, in all likelihood, propose that be amended to 1.442 million for next year. That would be an increase next year in your revenues, budgeted revenues of $258,667. On the expense side, there is a transfer in that 4B does pay into the general fund at 33% of the parks budget. When we presented that number to the 4B board, that number would have been a transfer in of $247,116. Currently, it's still at that number. However, as we get into the final stages of tweaking the parks budget for the next year, you might see a slight increase in that number in your transfer in. The only other item that you might see an increase is in payroll, and that we are in the middle of doing a comprehensive study, a comp study on market rates and for personnel. So there may or may not be a change in your payroll number too. Again, they would be small compared to the offset in what we anticipate the sales tax receipts for 4B to be for next year. But we would not amend that until after the new fiscal year.
And that's less than the 27%, but it's still a healthy number.
Yes,
Increase,
it is. And we're still, we haven't presented the general fund budget yet for adoption. And so we're waiting. We should be hearing in the next, week. We'll get our sales tax receipts for the month of August, which are actually for the month of June. And based on that number, there could be some consideration given for bumping it up just a little bit more.
Neat. Thank you.
What percent of the fund balance of 3.5 million that you have end of July that is already committed to all the different projects that you
So it's basically the annual budget, so above and below the annual budget. And so each year it renews. So if we don't spend it, it just keeps building up like a savings account. So anything that we've budgeted for the current fiscal year that isn't done and the money's not spent, it continues to build that.
So that's on
account,
this sheet,
right.
That's what you get.
That's different.
These are
But-
grants, yeah.
Right.
And my question is, we talk about all these park development projects and things like that. Where is that money
So,
coming from for all of that development?
Like the 500,000 for Glacier, that was
Fraser,
it.
yeah,
budget.
exactly. Those are the ones I'm talking about. Are they coming from here?
Yes.
Okay, so do we have so what percent of the fund, of this fund is already committed to projects like that?
Just the annual budget. So it's,
Just the annual?
right. Because if it doesn't get done,
It just carries over.
it appears that Glazier's not going to get done this year. So we budget
Okay, I
for
got
it
it.
in the
Okay.
following year.
So you include it in the budget and then,
Right.
I thought you had a separate
That-
project
that's
reserve
correct.
fund, and you kept the money in reserve, and it's drawn against that when the project takes place, because then you have a much better,
Right.
We try to budget for those items each fiscal year, anticipating the project coming to pass in that year and spending the money. However, if that doesn't take place, then it does just roll into your fund balance at the end of the year. And then keep in mind the commitments that you have on your incentives, those balances too. So
Yeah.
we try to budget each year for Burton and I get together and talk about which of those incentives that the board has agreed to will actually take place in that upcoming
Okay,
year.
okay.
And we try to budget for that dollar amount.
I had those same questions early on, and then there's funds that are in the general fund that were earmarked for projects that are partially 4B,
mhm,
but they're really not, the money's really not there.
yeah,
Meaning it's like bridge. So when we get to the trail section, the underpass going under Collins,
mhm,
money was ponied up by the developers for that several years ago. It went to the general fund. Nothing's ever happened. So now it's just mixed in with everything else.
that's, yeah.
So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, give us that 500 grand for the bridge.
Yeah. No, where I was headed with this was that if we had, an account set up where committed funds are already listed, and then you draw against that. So every time you look at the total fund balance, it is the balance that is available for us to maybe start on another project or something like that, right? But that's not how you're doing it. I
No.
understand that,
Yeah.
but
You could assign funds, or restrict funds for a certain project if you wanted to. And that would be removed from, your current fund balance. And so if you wanted to say that, hey, we're going to put $1 million into project A, and we're going to assign those funds so that we know we always have those funds for this project, you can. And then your fund balance would be reduced by that dollar amount,
Yeah.
meaning that is what you would have left to work with. Of course, you always want to try to be able to maintain a fund balance that covers your operating expenses too.
yeah, yeah.
Payroll and your contracts.
thank you.
Get a motion to approve the June and July 2022 financial reports.
I make a motion to approve the June and July 2022 financial reports.
Made by member Anthony, seconded by member Pat Navon. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. On to item number 4, discuss, consider, and recommend a resolution in support of the Rails to Trails Transportation Alternative Set Aside project. So this is the third time we've started to move forward with the TA set aside grant project. Done it a few times in the past, and each time we've done it, we've sought the council's obvious support in passing a resolution stating that the town of Sunnyvale supports the overall project. If anybody wants to review it, that's new. Here's the last version from a couple of years ago. And so basically that's what we're going to ask the council again to do is approve the project, and then I'll let whichever one of you is going to present the scope of the grant application as we're looking at it right now.
Yeah, so this round of funding is the transportation set aside, transportation alternative set aside. At the last meeting in when we met in June, this round of funding is the smaller of the two. There is anticipated to be another state call for larger projects. We are working with Half Associates again for this project. They're the same folks that have handled it in the past. This image here is from 2020. This round of funding was such a short turnaround. I think the notice of funding came out July the 18th, and everything has to be turned back in by September the 9th. What we've done historically is we submit this early. I believe we're submitting it on the 29th. No, the 19th, August the 19th, we're going to have most of the grant application ready to go, and COG will actually review it. All the letters of support have been sent out, and everyone is excited about it. But this portion, like I said, this map, there's not a lot changed on this. Certainly, the new there'll be updated aerials, and you know, this map doesn't show that realignment up there at Nance. So, anyways, just for some background on the Transportation Alternatives Program, eligible projects are things like shared use paths, on-street bikeways, bicycle pedestrian signalization, protected intersections, sidewalks, crosswalks, curb ramps, traffic controls, and calming measures and signage. The funds are provided on a cost reimbursement basis with a minimum of a 20% local match required for construction. And late, I guess not late, but today we had, I asked David McCaskill with Half Associates to give us some sort of estimate that he anticipated this project. So he said somewhere between 2 million and 2.25 million, which that would put our match at 400,000 to 450,000 for this section. If we were approved for funding, there'll be a funding agreement with TxDOT down the road. So if something was to change, you know, any number of things, if priorities shifted down the road, and it would come back to the board, it would come back to 4B as well as come back to council to make the final decision on that funding. So part of our application, we have to have a resolution by council. So, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And just to clarify, what you see in blue on the map is the primary trail, and it'll have a little bit of difference up there around Nance Road on the north end. But at this point in time, the application is just for the section north of Tripp, south of Nance, and then the feeder trails that are highlighted here in orange or yellow, whatever that is, going into the school, looping around, going underneath or over. That's yet to be determined, I guess, but the original plan was going underneath Collins and then connecting up to Stony Creek and their existing trail system on the west side of Collins Road. So earlier I alluded that there was funds that went to the town of Sunnyvale many years ago that were allocated to pay for that crossing of Collins. And I don't know the exact dollar amount. I was told it was 500,000, 450,000, 550,000. So whatever the number was, that's supposed to already be earmarked to help offset the cost of that. Of course, doing an underpass under Collins Road would cost a lot more than the money they put into the fund 20 whatever years ago it was. But part of the planning of Collins Road expansion going north is they're going to have to do some sort of bridge. And so in the past, the recommendation was that we shift that crossing to wherever the bridge that has to cover the gap at the end of Nance happens to be. So, you know, I guess all that's still up in the air of exactly where that crossing goes. For both proper use as well as cost management. And then next year, we've already been approved for the matching grant with the county for the design of the entire rail spur from the north end to the south end. And that's when we get into the hard work of figuring out the alternative routes to go around Stony Creek, and determining cost of alternative routes, cost of going within the spur. Everybody debates on which one makes the most sense and decide. And then on the south side, going around Stone Canyon. So at this point, we're just doing the center section and then move north and south as appropriate from there.
Yeah, one thing that's not on this map, like I said, these are from 2020, but the new application will have some sort of connection from just south of the SISD administration building that would tie into some sort of crossing there at the roundabout that would also be able to connect with next door.
That makes sense, because I know with the drainage improvement, they're supposed to be doing the sidewalk on Trip, so being able to use this with the grant to widen that sidewalk, because right now it's a 3-foot sidewalk or 2.5 foot or whatever it is. So
Yeah, and
wider and all that would make good sense.
Earlier this afternoon, the town planner and I were looking at some aerials, some updated aerials, and one of the new phases of Stony Creek that's not in the gated portion. There's actually it's in a cul-de-sac area, but it's actually an easement. So as far as the workaround that you were talking about, there is the ability to go. The lots, it doesn't appear the lots were sold fence to fence, so there is a 20-foot easement to make that connection outside the gated portion. So
Good. And then slightly, I mean, it's off topic, but it's still on topic with rails to trails. And then again, with the builders adding to public green space, if you hadn't noticed, they put in the gazebo by the giant detention pond, and then they've paved that trail on the north side, south of town east. So. And then I haven't gone out and looked at it, but my kids have over on behind the elementary school where they've paved. So, progress. Well, I'll make a motion that we approve or recommend to the town council drafting the resolution of approval for the transportation alternative set aside grant application. Seconded by member Anthony. All those in favor? Cool. We'll move on to item number 5, discuss and consider updates to the following projects. Most of those were in the very back of the agenda, but any questions on any of those? To me, Glazer's the biggest one right now because it's the big what if. I mean, now that now the Trip's back open again, I see the fire station. I hadn't seen it since it went vertical, so now you're like, wow, come along.
So what is the expected date to start working
On
on?
There's no expected date because the budget the quotes came in substantially higher, and then so to build the 10 stall and all that kind of stuff, that's all on hold, with barring us making a new decision to fund it at $1 million instead of $500,000, and then council approving that. So the next thing was seeing what could be done with the existing site to bring it up to code. So where do we stand on that?
it really just there's a couple of different ways that it could be done. I think from an initial safety standpoint, I think there's some steps we could take that could um, help that liability. After that, um, I think the price starts going up pretty quick in terms of making structures sound. That's a different conversation, I think. Um, you know, JD and I met with the operator. We went through some ideas, things that might work. It's just going to be a matter of, really, it's going to be a matter, I think, of getting everyone together and kind of fleshing out what's acceptable and what's not. And I say that simply because I think everyone's been conditioned to see the renderings of the $1 million project, and so it would certainly it would not look like that. So I think it's just hopefully once we get through budget, we get through some things, maybe we can get everyone back together and really try to make a decision that is going to be beneficial for everybody. So
When is our next, I don't think we have on schedule, but what would be the next date that would make sense for us to have a joint planning meeting with council? Because at this point, we can't do anything other than, unless the whole board agreed they wanted to pay for the whole thing and up our cost. Right.
Yeah,
So it would be better to visit and come up with an agreed plan before we, spin our wheels. So,
and I think that, I think JD and I have some ideas as far as trying to live within that $500,000 budget to make it safe, to make it better aesthetically pleasing. But I don't know that everyone would agree with those ideas. But if I guess if the charge is to make it safe, make it more visually, aesthetically pleasing, that we should do that. And so it's kind of like what you just said. I mean, until we get an opportunity to pose these potential solutions to everybody involved, certainly I would think it would be October. Realistically, I think it's probably October at the earliest.
I hate to say this out loud, but I think that if we go to another joint meeting with town council, we're in a way we'll be spinning our wheels if we just go in and say, what do we all think we want to do? We'll get in another hour-long discussion that we've done a million times over the past how long have we owned it? 3 years? 4 years? So to me, I think it would make more sense for either 4B and you guys, all of us, to get together and come up with what do we think would be an acceptable alternative plan within a reasonable budget, and then present that to council in a meeting and have them give feedback, or I don't like this, or I don't like this cost, something specific to pick apart as opposed to a vague conversation. Otherwise,
would you, our numbers small and you had the committee, I don't know, would you want to try to pull that whole committee back together?
well, the committee's
August?
small.
Right.
I mean, it's Kara Ranta, who is helpful because she
Michael.
has horses, Michael Giordano, Jim Wade, and Kevin Clark came in later in the process. So, it's not like a big committee. We could see if they're interested in spending more time on the project. But I think 4B should be involved too.
Sure. I think it would make sense to do at least find out what the bare bones, bringing it up to code and making it safe and trying to keep the horses,
Well, and just
and then have that to compare to the current bid for the 10 stall. So
Yeah.
we have a, you know, a goalpost to work from and say, we can do this, we can do that. If we're doing this, how do you want to fund it?
And
So
are we
ju-
sort of settled on the existing operator at this point? What happened with the RFQ or RFP?
So because everything was, the RFP was written as if it was going to be a new structure and everything else. And because we were already month to month with the current operator, and we weren't moving forward, we just left everything the same for the time being. But, you know, just some rough numbers. The walk-in sheds were somewhere between $6,000 to $8,000 each for 2 walk-in sheds, and you know,
How many are out there now?
so there's 22 horses out there right now.
But then the study said that 10 was the,
Yeah, I mean, I think both. I mean,
so you're looking at 80 grand to house the ones that are there now. Or
well, and that's
88
just for
grand,
the
actually.
structure.
Right.
I mean, those are going to have to be secured in the ground. Start getting, even though you can buy those in a kit form or you can have someone install it, they're still going to be flat work. They're still going to, just from a secure standpoint, because if wind comes through, we get straight line winds here. Those are just going to blow over, and so I think some of our ideas would be, you know, more firmly secured in the ground, and I just think there's other options. The kit, those look nice, but I don't know how practical they're going to be by the time you add enough of those for all the horses that are there. The concrete, obviously, that's an expense. So, you know, I know that lumber prices and things like that are starting to trend down a little bit. So maybe we can get,
Well, they're 50% off their high.
hopefully we can
High
get.
builders.
I think the best. I think what y'all are suggesting is a good idea, and I think JD and I can work with a vendor and try to get some numbers together, and we'll just plan on trying to do a work session with y'all and get y'all's thoughts initially and get some direction, and then
the water tower,
Or something, yeah.
so that it would be, the form and function has to be so the park looks nice.
Right.
But it would be 6 figures to pour all that concrete and get all that stone and the ironwork and everything to get that done. We tried to get just the chain link replaced with a split rail just so it would look nicer, and we're talking almost 10 grand. You know, so, and that's been, I don't know, maybe a year ago. So I don't know what the lumber cost would be now.
Did primarily though just the drought.
Yes, sir.
Even if
It
was
wasn't
being-
like this last year when we had the good rain and people still came out there and played when they weren't supposed to be there.
So
It's, you know, we just can't water it enough. There's not enough water to go around.
people harassing the neighbors is more.
Yeah, they what they do is they kick soccer balls over into that lady's yard, and then they go beat on her front door at different hours of the morning, because they go out there early in the morning when it's still cool. And you know, I mean, it's pretty upsetting.
Didn't we talk about putting up some sort of signage or ordinance so that way
We did.
we did?
Yes, ma'am.
So if a phone call was made, is it, can the
No,
police
ma'am.
department do anything?
Yeah, she didn't call anybody. And now when I drive up, they scatter
Mhm.
because they know my truck now. But you know, it's very difficult to catch them. And in my experience, you know, I've run several parks. What they do is they go from park to park in different towns, and they use up that field, and then they'll go to and find a new one, and they'll go use that one up. And because the status of that park is a public park, we really can't stop them from being there unless they're interfering with something that's already been programmed there. Like if they were to try to show up and get in the middle of Sarissa soccer practice, we could run them off. Okay, but because it's a public park, you can walk up and use it at any time. If it was an athletic facility, you would have to have permission to get on it at any time. You weren't be allowed to get on it at all, but that shuts off dad and son just wanting to go out there and kick the soccer ball around. So, and we don't have enough parks, in my opinion, to have an athletic complex or an athletic field at this point. They don't have another option if they want to go kick soccer balls into soccer goals, and it's just dad and son or mom and daughter or whatever. So we do the best we can, and we'll replace that sod, and it'll be back to normal next year, but it's right down the center where all the traffic is.
We did the fence for landscaping back there, but I want to make it look like a Top Golf or something. I don't
Right. Yes, sir.
that
Well, we
cost
moved
if they
what we
want
did
something
is
that went up that high.
we moved the goals. What we did is we moved them so that there weren't any play going towards that lady's backyard, but you can't secure those goals in the ground for safety reasons. So when we're not there, they swing the goals around and move all the little goals out of the way and make the field longer, closer to a regulation field for adults, and then play their games.
And normally when the demand was not what it was, you could rotate fields. That's normally what you do
Right.
to, offset some of that wear pattern. You may go out there, practice that area 2 days, one way north and south, the next day east and west, and then change the field. But because it's limited space, we can't do that. Not to mention just the demand with all the teams that are out there.
Yeah, when I began working, they had 17 soccer teams, and now they're over 30. So, and they don't practice out there on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They practice Monday through Thursday, and the majority of the damage comes from Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Try to figure out if we can do anything or suck it up and resod it every couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, you need to resod it and it's just in a section. It's not the entire, it's not the entire thing. And we did start this year an aeration program, so we aerated it real good. Next year we'll have the equipment to start top dressing. It was just too hot this year to top dress. It'd be bad on the grass. What we need to do is soccer sometimes trickles over and they keep going into the hotter months, our association, and I need to work with them. They need to stop as soon as league is over, and so that we can have time to give the grass the rest and to do all these projects on the grass to keep it as healthy as possible in a public park, scenario.
Good news on the lights. Town beautification. Progress.
Yeah, progress.
Any estimate on when that'll actually happen?
I'd have to talk to Lyle. I haven't.
Still waiting to sign the contractor. But
Yeah, I mean, we have the poles and everything on site. It's just a matter of JD. Do you got any in updates on that? I know he was working. Well, I know he was working with a contractor, but I don't know what the timeline is on if we're going to move forward with it.
Yeah, no, sir. All I knew is to prepare the park. We're going to store them at the park, Town Center Park next door, and make sure that they're, as far as the Parks Department, we're going to make sure that all the attachments are on correctly for the banner program and all that before they actually put them up in the air.
I was just curious if they'd be ready for holiday season or not. Hopefully so.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know that I don't think we'll have banners by the holiday season, but
We can if we go ahead and buy some. We budgeted for that for many years and haven't spent the money. So
may have a busy meeting next month then.
Can you give updates on the story and also the athletic club, or I forget what it's called?
So I know that the story, if I remember correctly, right now the story is in like administrative review with development services, so they're moving forward. Um, it hasn't gone to planning and zoning yet or anything like that, but it is finally moving forward. The athletic club, I believe, Lyle is getting ready to issue a grading permit for them to start work over there. And I think there's just some more final comments and things like that, working it out with their engineers and Lyle, our town engineer. But both of them are moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the insurance company building, that was the fastest building I've seen go up in a long time. Looks nice. So the 13 acres at 2,600, is that on the corner there of Beltline and Trip across from the bank?
It is.
Is that that whole mode section that ends at the salon? Okay, so if that, whatever they're planning on.
Yeah, there's
actually
been
develop that whole section.
yeah, there's been interest on the northern end of that property before, and I think right now they're looking at making that into two separate lots, that northern section, and then they'll plat each one of those individually as it develops out.
Down in upcoming events, are there any more fireworks this year? I know we did fireworks at National Night Out in the past, or is that going to once a year now?
Right, yes, sir. The reason we did the fireworks at National Night Out last year is because
Delayed.
Sunny Fest was rained out. So I'm not sure if the police department is planning on actual fireworks. They haven't said anything to me yet, and I'm usually the guy that calls the owner of the property to get his permission. So they haven't mentioned that to me. Our next special event will be the Veterans Day on November 11th.
Can we do fireworks right now? There's
I would say no.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
Till
they
it
actually did,
rains a lot.
that would be in October.
Mm.
If they actually did a fireworks display at National Night Out, that would be in October. But we don't have any special events planned until that day right now.
I guess I saw something. It must have been from the school. Something with the school. They were talking about fireworks. And I wondered.
Any other questions on existing projects? Not, we'll move on to discuss future agenda items and events. So we already brought up one on kind of leisure, readdressing that, coming up with a plan.
Yeah, that would be it for me. That and getting some sort of joint meeting with town council after get some movement on Glacier, get that joint meeting on the books too.
It would be nice to get an update if they're open to coming and giving us one from the story and the athletic club. Since we granted incentives for both of them and hadn't heard anything. All right, nothing else? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion made by member Chase, seconded by member Pat Manavon. All those in favor? We adjourn at 6:30 PM. 6:29 actually.
Yeah, less than an hour.